Good morning, everybody. I am Betty, and I'm here at my son Christopher's place in Denver. Real excited to be here. I wanted to continue the journey on my 10-day silent meditation, the Vipassana silent meditation. As I was thinking about this day 3 of the 10-day meditation. It's been, hey Randy, how are you? I'm with Christopher in Denver. I wanted to talk a little bit about my day 3 and specifically how, he's not here, he went over to a friend's house, but if he comes, I'll ask him to come. The 10-day meditation with Vipassana was really focused on developing one's mastery of one's mind. And for me, it was, I've been reading a lot about comments from people, and people said, oh, it was really difficult, it was tough to do. And I didn't find it to be that difficult, or maybe it was just because of where I was. Although in the middle of really thinking about what I was feeling and thinking about my thoughts there were times when the fleeting thoughts started to come. So starting with just a really high level review of what happened in the first 3 days, and now we are in day 3. Next Saturday, I will bring up day 4, which is when actual Vipassana begins. So I'm just keeping today to day 3, but just to give you a little bit of a review. When we first started, when we first walked in, we were told about different things that we really should not be doing. And the idea was to have, and I've got some notes here that I've taken just so that I can kind of keep my thoughts together. You can't, do not lie, do not kill anything, and really all of the things that I talked about last week and the week prior were to keep our minds pretty much pure, which is really interesting. Hola Miriam, ¿cómo estás? From Colombia, the Council General. So the idea was to keep our minds pure. And so when we begin, hey Bob, how are you? So if we keep our mind pure, then things that would come into our mind normally would be cleared away and allow us to really think. And that's what I'm finding today. Sí, yo sé, ¿cómo estás? Hey, Bob. So craving, aversion, and ignorance were things that we were seeing. So craving was craving something good, and one of the things they talked about is, to really wish something so badly that if you don't get it, then something bad is going to happen, or you're going to go into desperation. And today, okay, we need to see each other, Randy. So today, what I found this week on the craving part was there was something that I really wanted at work, and it was, and I noticed that there was an employee that was asking for something specifically, and they wanted it so bad that this is all they focused on. And then all of a sudden, when I took a higher look at this particular situation, I was able to see it more clearly without taking a look at the immediate need and everything that was happening right then and there, by taking an objective look. And it's strategic thinking. You might think, well, that's just strategic thinking, and that's what we get paid to do in leadership. And the higher you get, the more strategic you have to be. Yes, it is strategic thinking, but it's strategic thinking without all the noise of other things that were in my mind before. So what I'm finding is my decisions are being made a lot more succinctly, a lot faster. I can focus a lot easier because I can clear my mind. And I also notice when my mind is really busy. And have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and then you're talking to them and you see the glossy eyes because you know that they're thinking about something else? Well, that happens quite often unless you have trained your mind not to do that and to be completely present. And so those are the things that I found that at least this week, and now I'm on my third week after the training. So that's the craving. So when you're craving something so badly, you could miss, and this is what I noticed. So I'm now noticing not only my own craving, but I'm noticing other people's craving. And so I'm able to point it out and say, now notice what you're doing right now. By craving this right now, you are not giving yourself a chance. Hey, Mariel, thank you for joining. You're not giving yourself a chance to take a higher look at the entire situation without being so focused on the craving and all of that. Then the aversion piece was also really interesting. Sometimes we get into, thank you, Dave, really appreciate it. You're in London. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining from London. So the craving, I'm sorry, not the craving, the aversion. So when we were focusing on our body, in the way we got to focus on the and really understand the aversion, or at least for me, I can only speak for my own experience. The aversion part is really interesting, and for me in business or even in my personal life, when I have to have a tough conversation with someone, and I had to have a tough conversation with someone yesterday. Happy Easter weekend to you too, Dave. And sometimes we have to have a tough conversation. We know that there's something that somebody did that hurt us, or something, or maybe an employee that did something wrong. In those conversations, we tend to, as human beings, shy away from. And that is what I call aversion. What happens when we avert something that actually needs to happen? What happens when we don't focus on something that we really need to focus on it, or maybe we postpone it because it's a tough conversation, or we don't want to have the conversation with that person, or a tough situation that we don't want to encounter. By actually stepping into it and not having the aversion against it, then, and not even focusing on the pain that it's causing, but really focusing on the purpose of what we're trying to do, all of a sudden things change. Inside of the Vipassana meditation, the way that showed up for me was, okay, Bob, take care. And the way that showed up for me was there was pain. I was sitting down for a long time, and there was pain. When I focused on the pain itself, even though I needed to just really focus on my breathing, as I talked about last week, if I focused on the pain and I said, oh my gosh, this pain, my back is hurting, or my shoulder's hurting, because at the end, my shoulder would hurt. And if I focused on that, then the pain became bigger. It became larger. It got magnified. And then if I said to myself, everything that comes goes, or everything that comes changes. So I know that there's pain there. I'm just going to continue to focus on what I am focused on, not on the pain. Then all of a sudden my pain subsided, and I didn't feel the pain so much. And so at work or at home or with our loved ones, if we focus on what is the purpose of what I'm going to do, and there's some training that I've done in the past through LifeSpring, and they say, just if your intention is clear, people will get it. Well, it's very similar. Hola, Magnolia. It's very similar to that. So if your intention is clear, meaning if you have clear intention of really focusing on or acting according to your purpose, then the pain that happens, or the negative thoughts or the negative things that are happening in the middle of it, go away, and you just really focus on having that conversation. I had a tough conversation with an employee this week, and So much so that I had asked someone else to have the conversation, and they shied away from it. They didn't feel comfortable, so I had them join this conversation so that they would learn about how to go about having a tough conversation, or approaching something negative from a purposeful way. If I know myself, hey Yolanda, Yoli, oh my gosh, from San Diego. So if I know that what I'm going to be talking to this person about, even though it's a tough conversation, but I know that I'm doing it with love, and I know that I'm doing it with a pure heart and with a pure mind, because I don't have any judgment. I'm not judging that person. I'm just really focusing on really making a difference. Hey Victor, how are you? I'm making a difference for that person. Then the conversation is going to be taken completely different. At the end of the conversation, I asked, I know this is a really tough conversation, how did the person feel? And they said, oh my goodness, I feel like you truly care about me. I feel like this is absolutely a fair conversation, and I completely get where I need to change, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to really give me this tough feedback. And I know that it was tough, but it was really important. I've got a radio segment in New York every week after work, and we were talking about that, is how do you have tough conversations? And there were some questions from the listeners that were talking about, and so if you have a tough conversation, what do you do if the person it gets completely out of hand? And I just said, well, you set the stage for the tough conversation beforehand so that the person is prepared, and be respectful of that person. And if you are respectful of that person, and you show the respect and you show the care, and you're coming from a place that is not of judgment, and not of anger or hatred or sadness or depression or any of those things, but you're coming from a very clean space, then the person, oh my gosh, Robbie, love you too. I haven't seen you forever. I think you're in California. And so if you come to the person without any of those feelings, then the person's going to get that you really genuinely care about them. If you come to the person without judging them, then they're going to get that you care about them. I had a situation this week when someone came to me and they were judging me unfairly. And I remember feeling it in my body, which is now different because of the Vipassana. And we'll talk next week. Next Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific, I'll talk about how do you get the feelings, and how is it that you begin to react differently. But I felt it in my entire body, and so I caught myself before I reacted. And that's going to be a very deep topic next week, because it begins to venture into the actual Vipassana, which is seeing things as they really are. So I want to touch up on something. The first 3 days are really preparation for Vipassana. So believe it or not, it's 10 days of complete silence. You're only allowed to talk to the teacher. You begin at 4:30 in the morning, and then you end at 9 p.m. And they don't feel like they're long days, or at least they didn't for me. Toward the end, they felt a little, but the first 3 days are mere preparation. And I was thinking about, how does that translate? So if we take this to a 30,000 foot level, how does the preparation in preparing for 3 days to really enter into the actual Vipassana meditation, how does that translate into life? And I was thinking, I was remembering my gymnastics days in high school and college. Good morning, Liz. Thank you for joining. And when in order for me to say do an aerial, and an aerial is a cartwheel kind of in the air, so you kind of jump and you toss your body around and then you land, right? In order to do that, I had to really envision it, and I had to do a lot of training, but the training started in my mind. It started in my mind thinking that actually I can do this. I can see myself actually accomplishing this. I know that it's almost virtually impossible for the body to turn itself around in the air and to do a flip and then to land completely standing up without falling, without hurting. Before my body started to do it, my mind had to get set. And I had to literally visualize my body until I was able to visualize my body going through the motions and actually having my body go around and having the flip in the air and coming down to be able to land that aerial or land that whatever it was I was doing. I wasn't able to do it. My body couldn't do it because my mind had to be there. So let's take this back to work. I have my employees, we talk about building trust and adding value in relationships for generations. Until we get centered on what we're up to and what's important to us, then everything else is going to be chaotic. Everything else is going to seem like we're all over the place. But when we get really centered on what's really important to us, and this is why, I brought a book for my son, my hashtag values book. I happen to have one here. But this is why I wrote this book, and it's all about values, right? So when we get centered on what is most valuable to us. For me, I'm here in Denver visiting Christopher, my son, and Sandra came last night. We had dinner. She's coming after work today. So this is important to me, and everybody knows my children, my family is most important, more important than my job, and my employer knows this, and it's okay. So things fall into place when we are centered. Things fall into place when we actually have trained our mind to think in that way. So the decisions I make are really simple decisions for me. They may be difficult, but they're simple. Why are they so simple? Because I'm centered, because I've already trained my mind to automatically make the decisions that make most sense to me and to my family. Normally, this is Easter. Normally, I would be with my cousins and Yoli in San Diego and my Aunt Ruby and my brothers. But this weekend, I chose to be with my kids. And so, why? Because my kids are my life. Because they're more important. And so it's not easy, but it's very simple. And so it's an important part of being able to live life and being able to live life fully. So again, the first 3 days, all of this preparation and the fact that they didn't allow us to talk. So why the silence? And people talk about how could you stay silent for a whole 10 days? How could you do that when I talk for a living? And it was wonderful. And a lot of the reason why the silence was there, we were going through our own experience, and you can't really understand it, and I'm trying to get it through as best as I can, but you can't really understand it until you actually experience it. By talking to other people, then all of a sudden I would be saying, hey, how was your experience? And I felt this, and I felt that, and I felt the sensation, or I felt that. And then the other person could say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't feel that. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. And then all of a sudden, your concentration or your thoughts are going to get fleeting around that topic instead of what you are supposed to be doing to really train your mind. Remember, the whole idea was developing mastery of one's mind. And in order to do that, you have to train your mind. So when we were really focusing on the breathing part, which was the main focus the first 3 days, all kinds of fleeting thoughts would come. And Goenka, the teacher, kept saying, well, those are probably impurities in the mind, and you're going to go into the deepest depths of the mind. And so these impurities or these thoughts would come up. And maybe they were of my childhood, or maybe because I was angry with somebody, or all kinds of different things. But we really needed to stay silent, and we really needed to really focus on ourselves. So let's take this to today. Let's take this to this week. if I begin to compare myself to others, then what's going to happen? And I said this last week. Say I take a look at somebody who's number one and they're here because they're number one. And I say, okay, I'm going to compare myself to this person. I want to beat number one. I want to be right here so that I can be right above them. But what happens if my limitations are much higher than theirs? And what happens if my talents are better, or my strengths, if you look at the strength finders, are better, and maybe my competency or where I can get is up here, and I'm focusing on getting here because this is the number one spot, then all of a sudden what I've done is I've limited myself to their limitations. And so this is where the silence comes in. This is where the stop comparing yourself to others and really only compare yourself to your own best. And this is what I tell my people all the time. And my top performers at the bank will do 300, 400. I talked to somebody this week that had, I think it was 3,000% of what the actual goal was to do. People that are at outliers like that, if you begin to focus them on something like, give them a limit that is much, much lower, they're going to get bored. They're not going to be able to function because they want to do something different. Then their mind's going to start wandering, and then things are going to fall apart. So when you're leading someone, when you're managing people, we have to really focus on their own individual strengths in their own individual path. I'm going to be having a conversation later this week to a group of businesses, and we're going to talk specifically about that, is how do you lead a team, and how do you create a high performing team that is within the teamwork, that is cohesive and that becomes a team, and still are able to manage each individual to their strengths. And how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep people focused? Well, it's really, really simple. It's simple, not easy, but it's very simple. Again, focusing on what's most important. You focus on them, not on everybody else, not comparing them to everybody else, not comparing their strengths to everybody else. This is why during my one-on-ones right now, what I'm doing with my people is I'm making sure that every employee in my organization, in my division, has an individual development plan. It's not called a team development plan, although the teams also have plans, but it's called individual because we are all individuals. And just like in Vipassana, right, we deal with ourselves only, in not comparing ourselves to everybody else, not comparing ourselves to the norm. And in fact, they strip away your identity. Nobody knows your title. They didn't know that I was Dr. Betty, or they didn't know that I was an executive. They didn't know that I was an author. They didn't know that I just on a world tour and doing some different things. That doesn't matter. None of that mattered. What mattered was I was there. I was a female that was there to really gain mastery of my mind. And it was refreshing, and it was absolutely wonderful. So what would it be like, I wonder, if as we lead teams, and whether it be in the nonprofit world or wherever we are leading, because all of us are leaders in our own way, and we're either leading or we're following, one or the other. But what would it be like if when we lead people, we give them that benefit, or we lead them from this place of, it doesn't really matter what your title is. I care about you as a human being. I was entering into a CVS pharmacy this week, early before going into work. And I went to the door, and it was too early, and I heard this voice of this gentleman that said, it's 10 minutes, they're opening in 10 minutes. And I turn around, and it's this gentleman who is collecting money for this homeless shelter for drug addiction. And I went and started talking to him, and he told me about the drug addiction and how he is a volunteer. And I said, hey, do you mind if I post? Because I really want, the people that follow me here in Irvine to be able to help. And he couldn't believe it. And I had the conversation with him. I never told him what I do. I never told him, I told him my name. I'm Betty, and do you mind if I do this? Because I've got a little bit of following, and maybe some people will come. And he just felt so good. The last time I did this, the gentleman said, are you the one that took the picture about a month ago? Because the guy came over to the home and told us all about it. We never know who we're touching. We never know whose individual we're making a difference for, or what group we're making a difference for, and how wonderful it would be if we did this for everyone we touch, that we didn't care about so much their title, how much money they made, where they live. You know, my son lives in this beautiful place on top in Denver, overlooking, and but I love my son for who he is, not for what he has. And it would be beautiful if we could really look at ourselves, and I think about this all the time, is really look at ourselves with equanimity is the word that I learned in Vipassana. And if you look it up in the dictionary, it means looking at things as they are. So not looking at people in a way that we would want them to be, but looking at them exactly as who they are. In my prayers, sometimes I say, you know, God, have this person see me exactly the way I am. Not any more, not any less, exactly the way I am. And sometimes we get into positions where, and I can see how that could happen as I begin to speak to larger and larger audiences. On May 11th, I'm going to be speaking at the California Women's Conference. They're expecting 10,000 people, right? So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, please make me humble. Please continue to make me humble, because I never want to believe the lie. And what I mean by that is what's in front of your business card or what you have accomplished or any of that. And how wonderful it would be for us to all just be allowed to just be ourselves. Well, we can create that around us by looking at other people exactly the way they are and looking at them with equanimity. So some of the learnings, just to summarize, because we're coming up at the half hour and I've got 3 more minutes left. It takes hard work, discipline, hard work, and preparing ourselves for what's to come, and not taking life lightly, but really preparing. I didn't just turn on this and start talking. It was preparation. I've been watching videos, I've been doing research, and really searching within myself and taking notes throughout the week. How does this show up in my life so that I can add value, and true value? And if we did that, and I prepared myself for coming to spend quality time with my children, and the dialogue that we're going to have, and to begin to see the fruit of being a great mom, and well, they say I am anyway, and how wonderful it is to be loved completely unconditionally. You know, I had a moment on the plane right here when I got a text as soon as I landed, and it was from Mo, one of our employees. Hey Betty, today's my 3rd day. I am so grateful for being here and for working with you. And I returned the text and I said, congratulations, I am so glad to be on your team, because I really am on his team. I'm here to serve him, not the other way around. And I said, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for you in my life. And I do love him, and if I feel it, I do say it. Now, in a work environment, to say I love you is kind of a different thing, and he's a male and I'm a female, and people could possibly take it wrong. But when you come from a clean heart, with a pure heart, it's a different conversation, and people actually get you. Like I was talking about last week about innocent curiosity. When you're talking to people and you're asking them about their actions, not because you're trying to catch them doing something right, but you come from this innocent curiosity, and there's something beautiful about that terminology, the innocence that happens in a conversation, then people actually get where we're trying to get. So thank you so much for joining. It is now 8:30 Pacific, right on the dot. Hey, Manuel, I've just been talking about day 3 of my Vipassana training, and so it's the purity of thought is critical. The highlights would be discipline, determination, equanimity, and you can look that up in the dictionary, EQUANIMITY, keeping a pure heart, keeping a pure mind, clearing your mind and not allowing those thoughts to kind of impede you from being able to focus. And in the importance of preparation in everything we do. At the bank I mentioned, we do a lot of training before people go, and we do training around how do you have dialogue with a client and how do you create a deep relationship with someone from a place of not craving their relationship or not asking them to come. In fact, I don't even ask people to bank with me. They ask me if they can come and bank with me, and how wonderful it is for someone to ask you, can I be in your company, and for you not to be having to beg or to ask, but because you're such a magnet that you attract the right people around you. That's just so very important. My pleasure, Sherry. All right, so that concludes today. Next week is going to be really important. That's when I began the actual Vipassana training, which is really seeing things as they are. So I'll come back for another 30 minutes next week at 8 Pacific. Thanks, everybody. Have a super fantastic weekend, and with Easter and with the family, and remembering the sacrifices that so many people have made so that we can be here, specifically our God making the sacrifice of sending his son, and all of the beautiful things that we have as a result of all of that. So have a super fantastic week, and I will see you next week. Bye now.